don't be afraid to scale. Like when your team is professional and they're showing you that like, hey, like the metrics are trending in the right direction, like go with it and don't be afraid to push hard at the end.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. Have a very exciting episode for you today. Daniel Kooman, writer-director of the Daniel film, recent success on WeFunder, here on the pod with us today. Going to speak with Daniel about how he got into filmmaking, Unveil Studios, Daniel Film, crowdfunding, growth, and community audience building as a whole. Daniel, thanks for taking the time to do this episode with us here today.
Yeah, good to be with you, Jason.
And just to familiarize the audience a bit, what is your background? How did you get into the world of filmmaking?
Yeah, well, it's a great starting point. I guess if you're crazy enough to be a filmmaker, then it's a fun career to pursue. My brothers and we got involved. It's been 20 years now, so I know we/I look pretty young. My brothers Andrew, Matt, and myself, the three of us run Unveil Studios, and we started it back in 2006. And it was really because, honestly, a prompting to do something. It came almost like a still small voice when I was in high school, like, hey, maybe filmmaking, maybe see the world. And that kind of became my dream. My vision was to see the world and tell stories. And kicked it off with the startup of the company because back in the day, you might remember this, Jason, film school used to shoot on film. So you actually had to pay for film if you went to film school. It was 40,000 US dollars for 1 year of film school. And we did the math, quick math, three bros, 120K. And we thought maybe we could invest in a lot of really cool equipment for that price. It was just shifting digital. It was just starting to go away from film, even though we still call them films. We know that very few films shoot on film. And so we started with digital film equipment, and that was kind of the beginning because we put about 40 grand into our own studio, launched Unveil Studios, decided that year one would be a documentary around the world, Kenya, India, Thailand, Malaysia. And that was our first project, was a kind of like a doc piece about needs and happiness and what makes people happy and what do we actually need in life to be, sustained or to meet our needs and to have a meaningful life. And so we went around and it was like, this is our film school. Let's spend a year on this project and let's learn how to make a movie by doing it, being out in the field. And so we put our money into the studio instead of into a film, course. And it turned out that that served us well. Maybe gave a few bumps in terms of the learning because you're learning by doing, right? But we did our best to find a couple of mentors and just kind of went for it.
I love it. So first got the idea, spoke to you in high school, looked into film school, started film, the cost, you're doing the math. You said, hey, let's invest this into equipment. Let's start traveling Africa, Asia. Let's start putting together our projects. Love it. Yes, I remember my first video camera having VHS inside, later mini VHS, high, different variations of it. Playing around with action sports as well as family get-togethers. It's been fun to watch it evolve. You guys were early in on digital. Everyone's still recording on film. What was the traction from there? How were those first pieces, traveling around, producing? How were those first pieces? How were they received? How did you figure out more of the landscape of the industry from there?
Yeah, it plays into our story a lot how that first one went because we discovered early on that if you have a vision, like if you have a clear purpose or, film's interesting because you have a story. A story is a version of a vision, right? You have something that you're trying to put from, beginning, middle, end. It actually goes somewhere. It tells a story. So if you have a clear enough and concise enough story, people actually follow and want to be a part of it. And that's basically where it started for us. Was we realized there was a tribe of people that cared about what we were doing and about the stories we were telling. And even though we were, actually, it's interesting. One thing I do tell people is like, take out someone that seems like they're outside of your reach, that could be a mentor figure. Take them out for coffee because they will give you millions of dollars of insights for free because people actually want to give those secrets away. And I think that's where we started, was like, hey, let's take a few smart people out for coffee, see if they can help us. And you get some shortcuts and you get some connections. But then as you do the actual work, which was, it's the grind, right? You're out there doing the film, raising some money, getting out, and our first film budget was like $100,000 or something like that. And you put that together, and we also took some other risks. We sold ourselves into slavery. We got an advance on money for a 3-month construction job, but we got the money in advance so we could buy the plane tickets to travel around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you make sacrifices, right? And you find out that people actually, they see your hustle and they actually get behind you. And so we ended up, the journey was, we did that first project, a tribe started to form around us. They're like, give us updates, send us emails, give us a newsletter, tell us when it's coming out. And then we did a homegrown premiere with a red carpet rolled out. And we actually, it's probably the most successful screening that's ever happened in our home province. We're Canadian. It's probably the most successful premiere that happened in our hometown. We sold a couple thousand tickets and filled a theater for a half dozen shows, and it was like wildly well received, and we regretted later we didn't have our merchandise on hand at that event. We could have sold thousands of DVDs and all the good things, but we sold a ton of tickets, got a lot of people behind us in terms of the scale of how we started, right? And that was really the building blocks, is like, okay, there's people that care about good stories, so now let's tell another one. And it kind of grew from there. So the next one had a bigger audience and slowly built out, a following of, even if in the scheme of things it's a small-ish tribe or a following,
Mm-hmm.
those people will be amazing supporters and they'll get behind you. They might become investors. They'll be there, the first ones buying the tickets for a screening or whatever product you might be selling.
So it's all about the vision, being able to tell the story, beginning, middle, end. You found your tribe. They want to be able to see, newsletters, updates, what's going on. That tribe showed up for the premiere, 2,000 different people. I've worked on premiere launches as a marketer and after running successful crowd campaigns. I know that's not an easy feat, to have someone move from maybe to purchasing a ticket and to be able to fill, half dozen shows. Picturing what that community looked like in Canada and showing up, and the growth of the tribe itself. How were those early fundraising conversations? 100K. I know that's not a lot for the film world. Working on investor marketing campaigns all day long, and for various types of investors. I know it's also much easier said than done. What did the conversations look like that back then? How has it progressed today? Before getting into the audience and the community and how that's grown, how that's been taken to the next level since.
Yeah, I think it's shifted in the sense that now people can see the body of work and say like, hey, we want to be a part of this. And so you actually get some organic
Mm-hmm.
traction. You
Mm-hmm.
get people that go, oh, the quality of work is there. What are you guys doing next? Or how can I be a part of it? Or is there a way that I can be a part of it? At the beginning, it's more of the friends, family, and a bit of the grind and going like, hey, like this might not be the most amazing thing yet, but like it's going to be really fun and really exciting. It's like come along for the adventure. It could be in a bunch of film festivals, and it'll be in important story because of the characters that we're focusing on, and it's meaningful. I think that was what we sold, was the purpose and the meaning, and that is probably the secret sauce of any product, is that if it's purpose driven, and that can be various ranges, right? Like not everything has to be like a cause or connected to a charity, but it needs to have purpose or vision behind it. And that was really what our selling point was, is like, hey, we're telling a human story that has value. We're going to go into pipe villages in India, and we're going to go to mud huts in Africa, and we're going to find the faces of people that inspire us. Do you want to come along for that ride? And it actually inspired the people that came along. And I think that as long as you don't, over promise, under deliver, right? It's like, hey, you might even lose your money on this documentary, but it's going to be valuable in the sense of a human connection, spiritual connection for the audience. And when they bought that vision, it's like, yeah, hey, I could treat this almost like a donation at the beginning, right? Just to get involved and to support it, because they can see that passion, they can see that fire, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was kind of how it started, and where it shifted is, oh, you guys have a body of work that's impressive with some meaningful series and documentaries and a feature film. Now we can see that you can do the work. Now we want to see how big it can go, So it kind of shifts and grows over time, but you got to start somewhere. And for us, it was purpose.
Purpose. How did you determine the purpose for each film, for each documentary? This is where filmmakers can, make the right decisions, go down the wrong path, not have the tribe, not have the community show up. How have you been able to choose where you want to put your time and invest into a vision that is meaningful to you and has that purpose behind it for the audience as well?
Yeah, for us, it's very faith focused. So different people have different views on spirituality. For us, we're born and raised in a Bible-based Christian family, Christian home, and the purpose came from what, like, people have innate value. I mean, humans have innate value. We've done a series about being made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
There's this innate value in those of us that walk this planet, and when we see that value, I think people everywhere see it in a varying degrees. When we see that people are actually in and of themselves innately valuable, then I think we can find stories that are really full of purpose and that bring vision into audiences. Like, why do we care about movies like Schindler's List? Why do we care about movies like Blood Diamond? Why do we care about these powerful war stories like Black Hawk Down, which is actually the film that made me want to make movies? It's because of the human value of life. And so basically for us, it was finding stories where it's like, okay, we could do an environmental film and it has value as well. But for us, it was about the human stories and finding a beautiful human story that we could champion together and bring to an audience. And that's kind of been the core of most of our films.
So audiences, partners are able to look at your body of work. They're able to see the tribe. They're able to see the success. They're able to actually watch the films, immerse themselves in the stories, find relation to their own life and innate value. How did you choose to make a film about Daniel?
Yeah, it's a really cool story. The story itself and the story behind the story is cool as well. Daniel is my name. Is a character in the Bible and Scripture that I obviously was inspired by. There's a bit of a connection there, but it also just really seemed to be, for those that are familiar with the book of Daniel, it's a very unique book. It's 600 BC, so it's 2,600 years ago. A very unique time in history. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. Babylon was known as the Golden Kingdom. It's kind of the pinnacle of human kingdoms or civilizations. Things sort of go down from there to silver, bronze, iron, iron being Rome, these different kingdoms that have come since Babylon. But for us, it was like, let's look at the pinnacle of human existence and see like what happened then. And then historically, that's when Daniel hits the scene, and Israel was actually exiled to Babylon at this time in history. And it's a fascinating history because in terms of the spiritual connotation, Scripture tells us that it was actually God's will to send them into exile because he was teaching them something as a nation. And it also just played a lot into the COVID era, like when 2020, 2021, some of the different things that happened. Canada was pretty bad in terms of lockdowns and kind of overreach of governments and all this kind of stuff. And so seeing how that actually is quite a core part of the story of Daniel is sort of this overreach. And how do you respond as a human being when there's tyranny and when there's oppression? And they faced extreme oppressive forces while they were in exile, and tyrannical forces. And Daniel, who was a man of faith and believed that there was one true God, he was pressured to worship all these gods in Babylon. And there's a lot of spiritual energy around it. So it felt like it was for these times. It kind of had a 2020 feeling to it, which is when we started to think about the project. And then we ended up back to that whole idea of a vision that gets a tribe. We actually had some people that were like, hey, like, let us know if you're ever doing a scripture story, a biblical story. And so we shared our take on how to enter the story of Daniel in 2025. What's the way in? And when we shared and pitched that, which obviously people have to watch the movie to see how we did it, when we shared that, they were like, whoa, this is brilliant. Like, this is something we can get behind. And that was the seed money before the crowd fund to say, hey, write the script, put it together, make this thing come to life. And the question was, how do you make a film happen? Well, pretty much you cannot do it without the script, which comes back to this idea of writing down your vision. If you don't write the literal vision down, you will not get any traction. And I think that applies to all businesses and startups. And it's like, oh yeah, no, this is a really cool idea. And you can pitch it till you're blue in the face. But it's like, if you actually share that concise, practical, like, this is what it is and how it's going to work, kind of gives it some wings, you know. So it was like, yeah, let's finish the script, seed money, start it up, and from there it's really taken off.
It's got to be a bit confronting to write a script around a biblical story. Were you concerned that some audiences would have different interpretations of Daniel, of the scripture? Did you encounter any of that? Were there any, concerns, question marks in putting your own narrative for the Daniel film?
Yeah, it's terrifying. There's this special kind of responsibility, I guess, when you're doing something that is sacred scripture. You know, you're aware of the fact that this has been beloved by generations for literally thousands of years. You know,
Oh, yeah.
there's literally millions of people that know this story. There's hundreds of millions that have heard it in Sunday school and have their own impressions of what the story is, whether or not those are accurate in any way, right? They
Of
still have
course.
their impressions. So it was for us, the first 6 months was research and development. Like it was commentaries and backstory and historical records. And there happens to be some really interesting historical writings in addition to the scriptural references. So you're able to pull from things historians have written and pull from the actual scripture. And then you can also kind of go through in terms of the Bible portion and find any other parts of the biblical record that are at the same time in history. Turns out there's a lot. There's a 70-year period. So 7 decades is kind of the framework of this whole Daniel story that we're looking at. And a very large portion of Old Testament scripture is of that 70 years. And that is a great help as well because it kind of builds out the story. And so then it's a matter of, okay, we've put our best foot forward, done our research. Now we're writing the thing. Does anyone that has a opinion that matters on this actually agree with it? And what was really encouraging was we got responses back from like Old Testament scholars saying like this is the most accurate adaptation we've ever seen of scripture and things like that, which really kind of allowed us to feel more confident moving forward.
That must have been very fulfilling to have the script validated and from those type of scholars and experts. And then what did production look like? The trailer, it showcased on the WeFunder page. Amazing. The graphics. I mean, those are epic scenes that you were essentially creating. How did you even hit the drawing board to determine the look and feel of the script coming to life?
A big part of it was we wanted it to feel really practical and based in a setting that wasn't, just entirely built in a computer. So we looked at different locations, Thailand, Morocco, different parts of Asia. We eventually landed in India. And what was really cool is there's actually Babylonian remnants in the sense of architecture and some of the designs and things that we see from historical records that are mirrored in Indian architecture. And so there was visuals right away that felt grounded. And they also have buildings that are over 1,000 years old. So shooting at military forts that are hundreds of years old, finding places that you might spice them up in the computer or add backgrounds, but
Mhm.
the actual foreground and setting is real and is practical, and you can see the dust on it. I think that was a huge part of it. And then yeah, you can do some cool things with technology to add to it, but we're really doing everything we can to make it practical, and I think audiences can see that.
You're trying to capture the human. You want it to feel real, authentic, our innate selves showing up through the
Mhm.
story. So I love how you really focused on the in-person shots, India, that blend of historical infrastructure, and then adding tech on top of it to really take it to the next stage. Uh, it's amazing to see it come to life. I imagine it was beyond expectations. I mean, to look at a lot of what I learned, biblical stories, and even try to figure out, hey, how am I going to portray this for an audience of millions? And like you said, with their own connotations of what it could, entail. It must have been rewarding when it all came together.
It's really rewarding, and one of the things that Matt and I, as directors of it, like we try to, you want to set up, and this is probably true in a lot of industries, is you want to set up the framework for other people to run within it. So like
Mm.
that is really, it's really unique in film because you have all the different imaginable compartmentalized parts or departments, we call them, all the departments that come together for one vision. And I mean, it's like this in business, right? Like
Yep.
whether you're talking accountants, lawyers, like designers, artists, there's all these different parts. So we have all those in film as well, but then you have like specifically music, and you have specifically hair, makeup, and you have specifically production design and costume design and all these different visual art forms, and all these art forms have to come together, and the audience innately knows if it's not working. So it's like you have to do it in a way that is authentic. And then you have to, with a historical epic, you're like, well, what is authentic in 600 BC? Do we really know what it looked like in 600 BC? But you still kind of have this sort of sense of like what that should feel like. And so then if you've set up that framework and you're like, well, it's got to have, this kind of grit and this kind of weight to it and this kind of authenticity and tone we're going for, then you bring in amazing people, amazing teammates and artists, right? So like an award-winning Cannes film cinematographer, Santosh Sivan. He's like a world famous cinematographer. And you bring in production design teams that have done huge, like massive Bollywood and Hollywood epic movies, and they've done stuff at massive scale. And you bring in just unique talents from each of those fields. It's kind of what my brothers and I learned watching, Peter Jackson's production diaries on Lord of the Rings as kids.
Hmm.
It's like just surround yourself with great talent and don't be afraid to let them do what they do. And, like micromanaging, bad idea, right? So just let them run with their skills. Of course, you have parameters and a framework because you want them to fit your vision. But ultimately, like we really want them to bring their best and inspire them to bring their best. And then you have this text that's 2,500 years old, and they're like, man, this is inspiring. Like when they get into it, they start researching it. They are bringing something fresh from the text as well.
Hmm.
And that's kind of, I guess, the secret sauce.
All about the team building, putting together those compartments. Did you find people were more driven to join the production because of the fact that it was faith-based, biblical story, that they saw your vision? Was it easier to put together that group, that team, to make it come to life?
110%. And I think that that's why it comes back to vision and purpose again. It's
Mm-hmm.
like if your thing has built in purpose, like when you pick up the phone to call someone, they're like, yes, that makes sense. As opposed to you're trying to just sell them on something that, you think is purposeful. It's like, no, this has been audience proven for thousands of years. People love this story. So it's already got that built-in track record. And then people, again, they're inspired by it. I mean, it's like God breathed inspirational scripture. So it's like it's got some things going for it, right? So when you ask people, like you said, I mean, it is absolutely like it doesn't mean you're not pounding the pavement and working hard, but people are also like ready to join the team. And that's hugely encouraging, whether you're in, a startup or something that's been around for a long time or selling a product. Like once you do connect with that purpose, it's just amazing how people get behind that, right?
Mm-hmm. And then it becomes meaningful for everybody involved. That they're able to then share this with others. Hey, here's what I'm working on. The story of Daniel continues to get told. It sets the stage for a lot of impact to be felt in the world from it. And I applaud the fact that you went on to WeFunder and brought the crowd into the equation as well. That they're able to share in this. That you have amazing perks. They're able to feel like they're collaborating with you and sharing with their friends, family, maybe religious communities, maybe just neighbors on the fact that they have to check out the Daniel film, that they actually are an owner in the project. How did you decide that you were going to use regulated investment crowdfunding as a vehicle to bring more individuals to be part of the project?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. The precursor was a film that I invested in on WeFunder, so I knew that that was something that was happening. That was a few years back, and even though that particular project didn't produce really much of a return for the investors, what I did like was that you're part of the process. You're getting the updates on what they're doing. You're really like genuinely part of the team, and I think there's something cool about Reg CF in that you're actually part of it, like because the company wouldn't exist without you. It's like you're part of it because they need you, and there's a good thing when you're giving and taking that way. So it's like the people that are running it are like we love you. You're helping make this a reality, you know? And so I could kind of sense that from the outside. Then I saw two other films that had had some pretty good success on some crowd funds.
Hmm.
And it was like, hey, we have some distribution and excitement around the project. Let's put our best foot forward and start with a crowd fund. And it's actually really risky because in one sense, if that crowd fund doesn't work, that's probably proof that it's not going to work, you know. Like
Market
it's being
testing.
tested
Yeah.
by literally the crowd, right? And so in one sense it was like, oh man, it would really be a bummer to fail at this, because then maybe we're not even making this film, right? But I think that's where faith comes in. And since it's a faith story, it's like, well, let's take a leap of faith, you know?
Hmm.
And that's really a big part of the equation is faith, because whether you're a person of faith or not, you got to take these leaps, right? And for us, one of the leaps was to do the regulated, you know, the Reg CF and do the We Funder. And nothing feels quite as good. Well, some things do, but it doesn't. There's few things that feel as good as a complete stranger comes to your page and puts $2,500 into your company. You know what I mean? Like you get this really true, warm, fuzzy feeling that's more than that, because then you can actually communicate with that person and have a form of relationship with these different backers. And all of a sudden, you know, it's 100 backers and 200 and 300. And it's like, it's being proven by the crowd, and there does have to be that, you know, third party validation at some point, right? You can't just do premieres in your hometown and have a couple thousand people show up if you want to do something of more of a scale.
Hmm.
And yeah, so in a way it was like, well, let's take the leap of faith. And then people did get behind it, and then it was a matter of just pouring a little bit more gasoline on the fire.
As a marketer, I am such a fan of equity crowdfunding because you're getting the marketing value. You're getting millions of impressions of your content, of your advertisements. You're driving approximately 50,000 people per $1 million raised, just round figures used, industry wide. You guys brought, over 766 investors. And I picture each of those people and their thought process and what made them move forward, the peer-to-peer marketing that occurs and will continue to occur as you're doing the theatrical release, home entertainment. You're able to distribute through all of your channels. You're going to have these ambassadors, and I really don't think it's overstating. I think that you put out a good piece of content, a percentage of them at least are going to share across their channels. So it's a powerful marketing tool. I've worked with Fortune 500s, companies of all sizes. I think the marketing, the crowd effect that occurs on these campaigns is outstanding in terms of the user generated content and the way peer-to-peer marketing is occurring down the line and how that's going to fit into overall distribution and social sharing. So I think it's a great thing, and that feeling of ownership, not just hey, I purchased a ticket or I bought the digital version, as much as no, I'm an owner in a film, and how they're able to speak about it from there is a big deal.
Huge deal. And it really, it can't be overstated just how much yeah, just how much value there is in building that tribe as you're going to the market, like you're saying. I mean, you're building so much momentum into when you actually, in our case, like we're doing all that momentum, we haven't even released a film yet, right? So it's like you're building this audience that they're not only just excited, they're, like you said, invested. They have a reason to bring 200 people to their own hometown theater. You
Hmm.
know, like you might be getting a couple hundred fans out of one investor.
Hmm.
And if that's even just product based, it's the same thing, right? Because they're like, oh no, this is the best thing that I've ever seen, because they're invested in it, right?
Hmm.
And so that's just so cool, and it's so cool to see that. And the overflow is that we have people reaching out to us daily on all of the different channels, right? On Instagram, on Facebook. Somehow they text you. You're like, how did you get my number? You know, it's like people find you because there's this overflow of like, oh, there's actors reaching out to us and saying like, hey, this is my reel. And some of them are really great, you know, like sure, you get like some questionable ones mixed in, but you get people coming at all these different things. And so now you've actually created a community of people that want to be a part of what you're doing. And
Hmm.
just today we closed an investor after the Reg CF is finished. We still have units available for our film to invest in, and we still have a donation campaign, and we still, like today we're adding investors, but it's because of the crowdfund, right?
Hmm.
So it's this overflow. even once the ticker stops. So it is just so cool because that's just a genuine community behind you.
Mm-hmm. And it's social dynamics at play. The audience has less room to think, okay, is this just a new filmmaker, or random group trying to tell a biblical story? No, it has all of the social validators. It has the social proof of that volume of investors, that amount of investments. During the last month of your campaign, the growth was substantial, but because it had that line around the block feel versus more of a empty restaurant sensation, as many crowd funds do early in their run. So you were able to build on that. It all snowballed. And as there was a fear of missing out, you saw a lot of investors say, hey, I want to get my name in the credits. I want to be at the world premiere. I want my merchandise. I want to be able to talk about this. But because of the, I'll say again, social dynamics.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's like you also need to trust the process and get those expert marketers behind you because like you you know people are telling you when you start they're like the last 30 days, it's like you're like yeah, but like how are we going to get enough momentum? And um I do think that just trusting the process and pouring it on and scaling is a huge part of the success and the value of it. But like you're saying, like once people do see that validation, that was probably the biggest turning point, especially early, right? Was like, okay, there's like 300 people on here that say this thing's awesome. That's a pretty good proof if you're coming and you're questioning it.
Oh, yeah.
And you like the teaser trailer, but you're not really sure, like, is this legitimate? And then there's 300 people telling you it is. I mean, that's just 300 strangers that have bought into it that are starting to see the evidence, right? So it's just really cool how that community builds.
Glad to hear it's still continuing. I want to be able to ask some questions on behalf of founders who are tuned in. Perhaps they're running their own equity crowdfunding campaign and scratching their heads right now, saying, wow, how did Daniel do it? I'm hearing about some of the steps of this formula, but what could I test out? For myself, this could just be, for filmmakers and, towards their own growth. What recommendations would you have for a founder, for an entrepreneur, to test towards their own growth based on everything you've tried over the years? Could be, equity crowdfunding specific, but your overall recommendations towards growth.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that there's a lot of different, ways that it could work if you commit to the different plans. But one was just figuring out like who really actually is the tribe for this. Like, is in our case, it's a film. So is the primary person someone who has already invested in a faith movie, or is it someone that just goes to the movies that is like, I want more valuable and meaningful family content? Or is it, that so I think what we tested was like, okay, let's be like really niche and go after like film, like people that invested in a faith film before. Well, that's a pretty short list. Even if those people are passionate, you're probably not getting 900 investors out of that list. So it still gets some validation, but it's like that's just a small piece of it. It's like, okay, it's kind of like anyone doing Facebook ads. Like, how much are you going to focus in on one group?
Mm-hmm.
And there's value to it, but oh wow, it costs a lot more to per acquisition of a customer if you go that direct. So then it's like, okay, well, let's broaden it a little bit. Like, what about people that just care about meaningful media content? Well, now it broadens greatly. But I think what it was like finding specific types of stories that just appealed to that audience. So we went to different groups that maybe sold tickets to faith-based audiences, or maybe they had 10 faith-based movies that they'd released as a studio, and you start to sort of build out that list a little bit more. um, for us, it ultimately was like a turning point was just specifically putting ourselves on camera and telling our story as filmmakers of the why. And like we have this video on YouTube about the heart of Daniel. It's only got like 1,000 views or something. Like not very many views in the scheme of YouTube, right?
Right,
But we
right,
have
right.
had numerous people that say that is why I invested. So
Mm-hmm.
like it might even be
1,000
like
people.
50 investors off of that 1,000 views because it's just specifically talking to the right heart of that person, like saying like this is who we really are authentically. There's no like gloss on that video. It's just here we are as a camera and we're telling our story and it's authentic and people go, "Oh, yeah, totally agree with that." You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be flashy, I guess is the point, but it has to be authentic. And I think that that was probably a big part in finding that audience is like, well, let's just stick this in front of, it's a tailored audience segment, but it's not like so narrowed down that we're just going to hit 50 people with it. And obviously then you find within that couple thousand people that there's real believers. And then there's other versions of that. So we have a Substack newsletter and we have our own streaming platform and we have these sort of little audience segments. And it's just like we kind of know because we've built those little audience segments what they specifically respond to, right? Like what are they opening more of and what are they? So you're doing your own internal research and just to build that foundation of supporters, right? Because we kind of, well, anyone doing a reg CF knows you can't even launch without 50 grand, right? And that first 50 is actually pretty tough because you're building out the social proofs, right? And so we were kind of like, well, from those core audiences that we've been serving, some people have been following us for 20 years. We're probably going to be able to find that 50,000. And so that was kind of a building block. And so, those are kind of tests, right? Like, well, if we can get 50 off of this little audience that we've built, then let's see how that goes. And, maybe that got us to 100K. And then you're just doing building blocks, really testing. And then, I mean, as you guys talk about scaling, right? But yeah, so I don't know if that's a clear enough answer, but it was really finding those little audience segments and then which ones are there more sort of vibrant or more life on, and then we focus on them.
Yeah, testing different audiences, different creatives, different funnels. You're taking them down. Some incorporating the YouTube videos. I'll take 1,000 of the right people any day over 1,000,000 of the wrong people. It is a numbers game. You do have to have enough volume, but even getting 5% of 1,000, that's still the 50 investments that you're talking about. And yeah, that first initial burst of capital, it really does have to come from a first screen network. As a rule of thumb, it's tougher to get new audiences to participate until there's some traction to be able to point at. And I find founders often overlook who is actually in their network. Friends, family comes to mind. We'll hear from founders. We've already tapped into that. We've already kind of exhausted those resources. So you have to be able to be enrolling with your messaging and explain, hey, we're doing an equity crowdfund. Here's why. Here is our why. Here is the art of why. And this is how these campaigns work. And this is why it matters so much that we're able to get people here. And look at these perks. Look at all these different things involved. Even if they're coming at the in at the minimum level, it adds up. If they're sharing with their audiences, even more so. And I'll see CEOs shy away from the content that they have to create. It's like you said, authenticity, selfie video, more about it feeling real, which I imagine may be a bit frustrating for you as a filmmaker. Like, I want to do these different angles, I want to do these things, but sometimes it's the mobile phone video that ends up converting the best. And having enough variance, like you said, we tested this audience, tried this one out, found a pocket of performance here. There were some surprises over there. So being calculated enough, but leaving room for the data to show you what's working and to figure out what to do more of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What about optimization? There were slower parts of the campaign. I've seen different groups give up in those scenarios. What words of wisdom would you have for groups who are not seeing success right out of the gate, or maybe it's plateaued and they needed to determine, how to manage this to a point of effectiveness?
Yeah, I would say like in even just internal learnings, like we kind of ran it close to 6 months and I would scale that back, like some things should be dialed back and some things should be scaled up. I think that you want to give yourself enough time to optimize it and find that audience without, cutting it too short that you're like, man, we got only a week left to close and we just finally found who they are. So you don't want to maybe start with a 30-day campaign. But in many ways, something like a 90 to 120 days, in our case, I think would have potentially kept the momentum rolling better. We kind of had that initial wave, and then we had a bit of a blip, and then we had a big push and a scaled up at the end. And part of that is really because FOMO drives it so much. Like, I
Mhm.
think that our next campaign, if we do another Reg CF on a future project or a sequel kind of a thing, it'll probably be more like a 90 to 120 days, just to keep it just like all the way ramping, you know. So that's kind of one learning, at least internally. But also, I think a big part of it is don't give up if you did have a plan. You know, like if you're like, oh, these numbers and like the ROAS, and you know, if you get bogged down too early, I think that's why people abandon ship. And it's like, no, like trust the experts, especially if you have a team behind you that's like, no, like the last 30 days, it's going to be like 50% of your raise or whatever that might look like, right? You kind of just have to believe and you got to go for it. If you've gotten that initial proven audience, like you know, you got enough to launch, you're past the 50,000, you've got a group of people that believe in it. You're starting to see outsiders get on board. There's already starting to be that social proof for whether it's your product, your movie, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think it's gonna ramp up as the FOMO comes. So you just have to stick with it. And that was, I think, like I was unafraid of the scaling. Like I'd be happy to throw 100,000 a day if it was producing 500, you know? So don't be afraid to scale. Like when your team is professional and they're showing you that like, hey, like the metrics are trending in the right direction, like go with it and don't be afraid to push hard at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know it can be a lot to count on in terms of the FOMO and hey, it's all going to come at the end and hopefully the last 2 weeks, the last week, the last day. So I've seen groups, get a little reserved around spending at times. You guys were very good about scaling and intentionally and bringing the right audiences at the right time so there was enough follow-ups for that FOMO to be ready to be absorbed and acted on. Um, how did you know it was the right time to scale? What tips, what examples would you have for groups in terms of scaling? Many would say that's what we're all playing for. Are there any
Mhm.
uh, words of advice you have around scale?
I think that just not doing more than a doubling of your ad spend at any time. You know, like we didn't go from a couple hundred a day to 2,000 a day without going to 400, 800. You know, like we were going and ramping in a way that was, you know, with your team's support and advice, but also just like it's wise. You know, it's like reasonable. You know, it's like let's
Yeah.
see that this is proving out, and then it's like heck, let's pour it on, even if you know, when you get to a couple thousand a day and then doubling to say $4,000 of ad spend a day or whatever that number might be, it's
Mm-hmm.
still a big leap.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you've been proving that you are scaling and it's reaching, and it is kind of like you get rewarded for that if you follow the right path. Like I don't think anyone's going to see the right kind of a jump if they go from 100 to 10,000 just like that. But if you're ramping into it, it's amazing because of that. Just the different audiences you built, the remarketing to those core audiences that are like they've been thinking about it for 120 days, you know, like they've seen it, they're feeling it, they're almost a fan or almost a supporter. And it's just that final push, you know, it makes sense that just it's human nature, right? Once you're like, okay, yeah, I really do want to be a part of this and there's 3 days left, I'm in, right? And there's no better proof of that than in the last 30 seconds of our campaign as we're, you know, of course, refreshing. You want to see it kind of go from like the countdown to like the zero with the confetti, right, on a crowdfund, and it's like $36,000 in the last 16 seconds. So there's people that are literally waiting to the last moment, and that was a fun 30 seconds, you know.
If you're only able to pace that out for the entirety of the 60 days, 90 days, 120. Yes, yes, yes. It's like you said, human nature. We want to think about things, review it, not sure. We see other people hopping on board. We do it. Once there's that actual time clock, and this is your last opportunity, and are you doing this or you're not? You have 2 minutes left. Try to press the buttons quick enough to get it in on time. The the people show up, the numbers show up. And like you said, intentionally scaling, looking to see performance, looking to show the ad platforms. These are ads that audiences are clicking through and converting on. And once there's enough volume there and you're jumping, in incremental levels, you're able to see the same levels of performance, the same conversion rates, the same click-through rates at higher volumes. and the machine learning can really do its thing at that point as well to find the right audiences, the right days and times of week, the right geolocations, so that it's actually producing at stronger levels as you're spending more. Where yes, if you jump too high, too fast, it's basically starting the campaign over versus doing more of what's working. So excellent breakdown of that. I feel like there's so much for listeners, viewers to tap into and incorporate into their own model from there. It must be a remarkable experience having these offline conversations, raising 100K, early projects. Now, and I know you've done a lot of capital raising in between, but over 1 million from digital audiences who are later going to be, enthusiasts. I mean, they're credits on the film and sharing with the people in their networks. It's exciting to watch, very fulfilling to be a part of, and excited to see the next rollouts, the next projects, the next iterations from here.
Yeah, we're really excited. And if you can give that thing that they're gonna be proud of it, right? It's not like they're just gonna be a part of something and then it's gonna go away. Like this is something that we watch for 30, 40, 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do our part, which is just make them proud of that story that they're a part of, it's only gonna build more momentum for the next one. So yeah, just serve that audience, right?
I could absolutely see this being a film that my wife and I share with our kids years down the line. I could talk about the films, biblical films that, we watched once a year or, periodically growing up. I think a lot of people have those shared experiences and stories. I think it's a great way to put it. And Daniel, want to tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to work with you on this and the opportunity for you to create this content with us, hop on the podcast, add this into your schedule. Yeah, taking a full page of notes here, even beyond what I saw firsthand, being able to get an understanding of your story and all of the working components, as you would say. For anyone who's tuned in and wants to get in touch with you, learn more, participate in the donations campaign, participate in one way, shape, or form, where's the best place for them to go to learn more? And any final thoughts you want to leave us here with today?
Yeah, well, before I share that website and how people can learn about it, just a big thanks to you and your team. Like you guys are a huge part of its success. And when you have those professionals behind you, like you guys do have a really big team, right? And you're bringing all of the expertise of all of those elements of your team to each project that you guys are behind. So when you have that support, it does for those founders and those that are like on the fence about it, like find a great team, like a DNA team, because when you have that support with you, now we're all going together to something. Because if you succeed, we succeed. If we succeed, you succeed. Mm-hmm. It really does feel that way. It's a reciprocal relationship, and that I think is huge. So like building out the team absolutely is massive, and so we've appreciated what you guys have helped to support our work. And yeah, beyond that, I think anyone interested in learning more, our website's danielthemovie.com. If you go to danielthemovie.com, you'll find about the project. You can see trailer. You can learn about how you can donate or invest. The regulation crowdfund is closed, but accredited investors can still invest in the movie. We are still seeking investors. We have post-production and visual effects and some pretty exciting cast cameos that we're trying to still fund on the project. So you can still get involved, whether as a donator or investor, by going to danielthemovie.com.
And highly recommend that you do. Check it out, watch the trailer, get involved, take Daniel up on that invitation. Daniel, thanks again for hopping on the podcast here. Really enjoyed the discussion. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, viewing in as well. We'll see you all next time. Take care.